Family should be your sanctuary, not the place where you fight to prove your worth. I'm Haley Bryant, and for most of my life I believed that family meant unconditional love, support, and trust. I thought I understood what it meant to stand by the people you care about. But I was wrong. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who test your limits, who turn your kindness into a weapon against you. Growing up, it was always just me and my older brother Mason against the world. We lost our mom when I was 10, and from that moment, Mason stepped up in ways a teenage boy shouldn't have had to. He wasn't just my brother, he became my protector, my best friend, and the one person I knew I could always count on. So, when he married Danielle 6 years ago, I wanted nothing more than to welcome her into our family with open arms. I genuinely hoped she would bring him the happiness he deserved. Danielle seemed perfect at first. She was polished, ambitious, and had this effortless charm that drew people in. I remember the day Mason introduced her to me over brunch at a cozy cafe downtown. She complimented my homemade scarf, smiled warmly, and asked thoughtful questions about my work as a preschool teacher. I liked her. I really did. Their wedding was beautiful, one of those picture-perfect garden ceremonies with white roses and soft piano music. I was honored to be one of Danielle's bridesmaids, even though I'd only known her for about 10 months at the time. It felt like I was gaining a sister, and for a while that illusion made me happy. When Mason and Danielle announced they were expecting twins 2 years later, I was overjoyed. After my long-term relationship had quietly crumbled, leaving me unsure if I'd ever start a family of my own, the idea of becoming an aunt filled a void I hadn't even realized was growing inside me. From the moment I held Liam and Lily in my arms, I felt this fierce, unshakable bond. They were my world. At first, things were easy between Danielle and me. She returned to work part-time at a local boutique when the twins were toddlers, and I stepped in to help with childcare. My flexible teaching schedule gave me 3 weekdays off, which I happily dedicated to spending time with Liam and Lily. It wasn't a chore, it was a joy. Those two brought color back into my life in ways I can't fully explain. I thought I was doing a good thing. I thought I was being a good sister, a good aunt. I built my life around them, picking them up from playgroup, taking them to the zoo, spending quiet afternoons making messy art projects on my living room floor. My apartment wasn't big, but it was filled with their laughter, their toys, and their sticky little handprints. It became their second home. I didn't ask for anything in return. I never treated it like a job. These were my family, my people. Every time Mason thanked me with a takeout dinner or helped me fix a leaky faucet, it felt like enough. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Danielle's gratitude started to sour. She would send me detailed lists of what the twins could eat, what time they should nap, which playgrounds she considered clean enough. At first, I brushed it off as typical new mom anxiety. I wanted to support her to show her that I respected her choices as a mother. But over time, her messages became more frequent, more demanding, and less about the kids' needs and more about controlling every minute they spent with me. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself it was worth it for Liam and Lily. But there were moments, quiet, creeping moments where I felt the weight of her constant criticism sink into me like a stone. The way she inspected the twins from head to toe when she picked them up as if she were searching for proof I wasn't careful enough. The way she'd ask, "Did you really take them to that park?" as though I'd dragged them to a war zone instead of a playground. One day, while we were at a family barbecue, she made a comment I've never been able to forget. I was helping Lily put ketchup on her hot dog when Danielle, in front of everyone, laughed and said, "Well, I guess this is good practice for Haley since she doesn't have kids of her own." The words were sharp, wrapped in a sweet tone, but they pierced me deeply. I wanted to disappear in that moment, but I smiled and said nothing because I didn't want to start a scene. I didn't want to disrupt the illusion of family harmony. I ignored the warning signs because I didn't want to lose the twins. I thought if I just kept giving, if I just kept loving them enough, things would get better. I couldn't have known that all the patience, all the self-sacrifice would eventually be weaponized against me. I always believed family was supposed to be your safest place. But sometimes it's where the deepest betrayals grow unnoticed until the day they explode right in front of you. At first, I didn't see it for what it was. When Danielle started sending me more detailed instructions, I genuinely thought she was just trying to be a good mother. After all, it's normal to worry when you leave your children in someone else's care, even if that person is your sister-in-law who loves them more than anything. But somewhere along the way, those simple reminders turned into suffocating rules. It began subtly. Danielle would text me mid-morning asking for photos of the twins while we played. I didn't mind. It felt sweet that she wanted to stay connected during her shifts at the boutique. I would send pictures of Liam building block towers and Lily with frosting smeared across her cheeks after we baked cupcakes. I liked sharing those moments. But soon the messages changed. They came in rapid succession. Make sure they have their snacks at exactly 10 go. Please don't let them nap after 1:30. No peanut butter sandwiches. I read something about cross-contamination this morning. Don't let them watch any cartoons with talking animals. I think it's overstimulating. It was as if she wanted to parent from a distance, as if my home was merely an extension of hers, and I was just an unpaid caretaker following orders. Every choice I made, what park to visit, what book to read, what snack to offer, became something she scrutinized. Still, I told myself this was just Danielle's way of coping with being a working mom. I tried to be understanding. I tried to keep the peace. But Danielle didn't make it easy. She began calling me during my time with the twins not once or twice, but sometimes 3 or 4 times a day just to check in. If I didn't answer immediately, she'd follow up with a string of texts. Why aren't you picking up? Are you with the kids? Are they okay? Please don't ignore me. It didn't matter that I was usually in the middle of reading them a story or helping them climb the jungle gym. It didn't matter that I was present and attentive. What mattered to Danielle was control. She didn't want a co-parent. She wanted a stand-in with no voice of her own. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing myself. Was it okay to take them to the library if I hadn't explicitly asked? Was giving them a cookie after lunch going to spark another passive-aggressive remark? Every decision became a quiet source of anxiety. I remember one particular day, vividly. It was a rainy Thursday, and the twins and I spent the morning building a massive blanket fort in my living room. We laughed, told stories, and pretended we were hiding from imaginary pirates. It was one of those magical, simple days I knew they'd remember. But when Danielle picked them up, her eyes scanned the room like a detective searching for clues. "Why are they still in their pajamas?" she asked sharply. "We had a cozy day inside," I explained, trying to sound upbeat. "We made a fort and played all morning. And you let them have hot chocolate with marshmallows." She pressed, holding up Lily's empty cup. "It was a treat," I said, still smiling though my stomach had begun to twist. Her reply was clipped. "Next time, check with me first. Next time." As if I needed her approval to share joy with her children. As if I wasn't capable of making safe, loving choices for the people I'd practically been raising alongside her. Mason, bless his heart, rarely stepped into these conversations. He'd brush it off, tell me. That's just how Danielle is, and ask me to be patient. He was trapped too, I think. Torn between his wife's constant demands and the sister who had been his rock since we were kids. I wanted to tell him how exhausted I was, how I felt like I was constantly failing some invisible test, how no amount of effort seemed good enough for Danielle, but I stayed silent. I told myself I was doing this for the twins, because they were the ones who mattered. They were the ones who ran to me with messy hugs, who called my apartment their funhouse, who clung to me when they were tired or sad. I couldn't bear the thought of losing that. But Danielle's behavior didn't stop with instructions and criticism. She began planting little seeds of doubt, subtle digs that made me question myself. "It must be hard for you never having had kids of your own," she'd say, feigning sympathy. "I can't imagine not knowing what real maternal instincts feel like. Or worse, you're great with them, Haley. It's just different when they're yours." Those words burrowed deep. They made me wonder if I was overstepping, if my love for the twins was somehow less valid because I didn't give birth to them. I began shrinking inside myself. I stopped suggesting new activities. I triple-checked my messages before replying to Danielle. I found myself asking permission for things I'd done freely before baking cookies, playing in the backyard, even singing songs before nap time. I was losing myself. I was becoming smaller and smaller in the shadow of her control. But love has a way of masking abuse. You tell yourself it's just a rough patch. You convince yourself that if you try harder, bend further, it will get better. I didn't realize I was already in a cage, one carefully built from guilt, fear, and silent expectations. And I didn't yet know how hard I would have to fight to break free. It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday, the kind of day where the sun felt just right. The breeze was soft and the park seemed like the safest place in the world. I remember thinking as I packed Liam and Lily's favorite snacks into my canvas bag that maybe today would be different. Maybe today I wouldn't get a barrage of texts or a list of criticisms from Danielle. Maybe today would just be simple. The twins were giddy as we pulled up to the park. They raced to the swings, shouting over each other about who would go higher. I pushed them, their laughter filling the air, and for a little while everything was light again. I forgot about the pressure. I forgot about the tightrope I'd been walking for months. I just soaked in their joy. After the swings, we moved to the open grass, where Liam insisted we play his new favorite game, chase the giant beach ball. He giggled uncontrollably as the wind pushed the ball just out of reach, and he darted after it with the determination only a 4-year-old could have. And then it happened so fast I barely registered it. He tripped over an uneven patch of grass and landed hard on his knees. The moment froze in my mind, the sharp intake of his breath, the tiny wail that escaped his lips, the tears that followed. I rushed to him instantly, my heart squeezing in that familiar protective way. His knee was scraped a small trickle of blood, making it look worse than it really was. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, kneeling beside him. "It's just a scrape." "You're so brave." I reached into my bag, pulling out the mini first aid kit I always carried. Years as a preschool teacher had made me an expert at patching up playground injuries. I cleaned the wound, carefully applied some ointment, and covered it with a bright blue dinosaur bandage. By the time I'd finished, Liam's sobs had quieted. His face lit up when I showed him the dinosaur on his knee, and within minutes he was back on his feet, chasing after his sister as if nothing had happened. Accidents happen. Scraped knees are part of growing up. I thought Danielle would understand that. I was wrong. The rest of our day went beautifully. We ate peanut butter sandwiches under the shade of a tall oak tree, fed ducks at the pond, and stopped for ice cream on the way home, a spontaneous treat that made Lily's entire face light up. It was the kind of day I wanted to bottle and keep forever. We ran a little late. Traffic was heavier than I expected, and I hadn't thought to send Danielle a text about the delay. It was just 30 minutes, surely that wouldn't matter. The moment I stepped into their house, I knew I had miscalculated. Danielle's face was twisted in a mixture of panic and fury. "Where have you been? I've been calling you for 40 minutes!" She snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. I fumbled for my phone, realizing it was still on silent from our library trip earlier in the week. "I'm so sorry," I said, my heart thudding. We stopped for ice cream, and traffic was worse than I thought. "The kids are fine." But she wasn't listening. Her eyes zeroed in on Liam's knee. "What happened to him?" she demanded, rushing over as if I had returned him with a broken leg. "It's just a scrape," I explained calmly. "He tripped in the park, but I cleaned it properly, and—" "You let him get injured." She cut me off, peeling back the bandage, despite Liam's protests. "And you didn't even call me." "Danielle, it's not serious." I handled it. I've seen hundreds of scrapes like this. "Oh, don't you dare act like you know better," she hissed, her voice dripping with condescension. "These are my children, not yours. You should have told me immediately." Before I could say anything else, Danielle grabbed her phone. "I'm calling the police." I thought she was bluffing. I thought this was another one of her overreactions, a power play, a scare tactic, but her fingers moved with terrifying purpose. She dialed, described the situation in a way that made it sound like I had been recklessly endangering Liam's life, and insisted they send someone immediately. I stood frozen, my hands trembling as she spun a version of events that barely resembled the truth. I glanced at Liam and Lily, both of them wide-eyed, their faces tight with confusion and fear. When Officer McKinley arrived 20 minutes later, I tried to hold myself together. I explained everything calmly, showed my credentials as a certified teacher, and demonstrated that I'd handled the scrape with proper care. He asked Liam a few gentle questions, looked at the now barely visible injury, and nodded. "There's no evidence of neglect or endangerment here," he said firmly. "It's a minor childhood accident, but the damage had already been done. The shame, the humiliation, the crushing realization that Danielle hadn't just crossed a line, she'd obliterated it. She had called the police on me over a scraped knee. As I left their house that day, my heart in pieces, I understood that something inside our family had broken, something that wouldn't be easily repaired. And for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder, maybe loving them wasn't enough. Maybe it was finally time to protect myself. I don't remember the exact moment when I realized I was done, but I remember how it felt, a quiet, hollow certainty that settled in my chest like a final note at the end of a painful song. For days after Danielle called the police on me, I lived in a daze. I replayed the scene over and over in my head, dissecting every detail, every word, every decision I had made. I kept asking myself, did I make a mistake? Did I really mishandle the situation? Was I careless? But the answer always came back the same. No, I had done everything right, and still it wasn't enough. Mason reached out almost immediately. His text came the same night, simple but heavy. "I'm so sorry. Please, can we talk?" I ignored it at first. I didn't trust myself to answer without all the grief and anger pouring out in ways I might regret. The next evening, he showed up at my door. I let him in because he was my brother, because some part of me still needed him to understand what had been broken. We sat in silence on my couch, neither of us knowing where to begin. Finally, Mason spoke. "What Danielle did, calling the police, it was wrong. I know that. Then why didn't you stop her?" The words slipped out sharper than I intended, but the hurt was too fresh, too raw. His shoulders slumped. By the time I got home, the officer was already there. I didn't know until it was too late. I stared at him, feeling the weight of something I didn't want to say out loud. "You didn't know because you trusted her to be reasonable. You didn't know because you've spent years letting her rewrite the rules and silence everyone else's voice." Instead, I simply asked, "What are you going to do about it?" He rubbed his face with his hands, exhausted. "She's under a lot of stress. She's always been overprotective. She didn't think about how it would impact you. Don't make excuses for her." My voice was steady now, solid in a way I hadn't felt in months. "She didn't think about me. She didn't think about what this could have done to my job, to my reputation, to my life." "I know," he whispered. "I know. We talked for hours. Mason kept asking what he could do to make it right. He apologized. He begged me not to give up on the family, not to pull away from the twins. His desperation was real, but it didn't move me the way I expected it would. I loved my brother. I loved Liam and Lily more than I could put into words. But something had shifted inside me. I couldn't unsee what had happened. I couldn't pretend that calling the police on me was just another argument to smooth over. I looked him in the eyes and told him the hardest truth I'd ever spoken. "I'm not babysitting anymore. I can't. I won't." "Haley, please," he said, panic tightening his throat. "The kids." "I love them," I interrupted gently. "And I still want to be in their lives. But this being their regular caretaker, no, that chapter is over. For the first time in years, I chose myself. Not guilt, not obligation, not fear. I chose me. It felt like losing something precious, like standing in the wreckage of a home you'd built with your bare hands and realizing you had to walk away from it to survive. The next few days were agonizing. The twins' absence was like a hollow ache in my bones. I missed their sticky hugs, their bedtime stories, their sleepy heads resting on my shoulder. I missed the way Lily mispronounced words, how Liam would show me his latest crayon masterpiece with wide-eyed pride. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt lighter. I felt like I could breathe. For so long, I had twisted myself into knots to make everyone else comfortable. I had accepted the silent, growing weight of Danielle's scrutiny because I thought that was the cost of being close to the twins. I had believed wrongly that love meant enduring whatever came my way. I see now how dangerous that belief was. When I finally confided in my best friend Naomi over coffee a week later, she looked at me with this fierce tenderness and said, "Haley, you did the right thing. You don't owe anyone your peace just because they share your blood. Her words settled over me like a soft blanket. I clung to them in the quiet moments when I missed the twins so much it physically hurt. Mason called again and again, asking if I'd reconsider. He told me they couldn't find affordable childcare, that Danielle was struggling to balance her shifts at the boutique, that the twins were asking for me constantly. I stayed firm. I'll see them at family gatherings, I told him. I'll be their aunt. I'll love them forever. But I won't be their babysitter. Not like before. Not under Danielle's roof. Not without safety and respect. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. For the first time, I understood that I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking toward myself. And that was the beginning of everything changing. After I told Mason I wouldn't babysit anymore, I expected some resistance. I thought Danielle would try to argue, maybe even lash out again. But I wasn't prepared for how fast the cracks would begin to show in their carefully constructed life. At first, Mason tried to downplay it. He told me they'd figure something out, that they'd hire someone, that it wasn't a big deal. But the way his voice faltered, the way he hesitated, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't prepared to lose me. For 2 years, I had been their safety net, their unpaid, always available solution, and suddenly that net was gone. I found out from our mother, who still spoke to Danielle regularly, that finding childcare wasn't going as smoothly as Mason had promised. Every daycare nearby either had long wait lists or cost more than they could afford on Danielle's part-time salary and Mason's already stretched income. Danielle apparently started reaching out to extended family, asking if anyone could step in even temporarily. She called our cousin Mia, who had 3 kids of her own and barely enough time to breathe, let alone watch 2 more toddlers. She asked my Aunt Carol, who politely declined, saying her arthritis wouldn't allow her to keep up with energetic 4-year-olds. Desperation doesn't wear well on people like Danielle. She had always prided herself on appearing in control, the mother who could balance everything, the woman who managed it all with a smile carefully curated for Instagram. But now, cracks were forming and the world she'd built on my free labor began to crumble. Mason was the first to buckle under the strain. I remember getting a text from my dad. Mason's been taking a lot of personal days from work lately. He told me he's staying home with the kids because Danielle can't get coverage. I could almost hear the worry in his voice through those few words. A week later, Mason called me sounding completely drained. "I don't know how you did this, Haley," he confessed. "Keeping up with them all day, balancing meals, playtime, naps, I thought I was pulling my weight before, but I didn't see half of what you were handling." It wasn't an apology. Not yet. But it was the first crack in his blind loyalty to Danielle. Meanwhile, Danielle took to social media in a way I found both infuriating and oddly satisfying. Her once carefully curated feed full of family brunches and picture-perfect park outings shifted to vague, bitter posts. Why is it so hard to find good help these days? Working moms deserve better support. Childcare shouldn't be this impossible to find. The comments on her posts were scarce. It seemed the community she'd expected to rally around her wasn't there. I knew why. People talk. And Danielle's reputation for being impossible to please had made the rounds. A friend of mine, Heather, whose daughter was in the twins' preschool class, told me over coffee one day, "Danielle cornered me in the parking lot yesterday, practically begging me to recommend someone who'd work for cheap. When I mentioned the after-school program, she said it was basically a warehouse for kids. Like she's still holding out for another version of you." I felt a strange mix of emotions hearing that. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part ached, knowing the twins were caught in the middle of all this. And that ache only deepened when I learned the twins had been acting out at preschool. According to Heather, Liam had withdrawn, becoming unusually quiet, while Lily had thrown a full-blown meltdown during circle time, screaming that she wanted her Aunt Haley. I never wanted to be the cause of their distress, but I reminded myself I wasn't. Danielle was. She was the one making me the villain in their little world. I had offered to see the twins in other settings, at family gatherings and public spaces, even with Mason present. Danielle refused all of it. To her, it was all or nothing. If I wouldn't be her convenient unpaid nanny, then I didn't get to see them at all. Control was always her endgame. I heard through my mom that Danielle eventually found a college student named Amy who could babysit 2 days a week. But unlike me, Amy charged $17 an hour, and she wasn't available on the days Danielle worked most. Money started getting tight. They canceled the twins' swim lessons. Danielle dropped her monthly spa days, a ritual she once claimed was non-negotiable for her mental health. And Mason. He kept taking personal days, chipping away at his carefully built reputation at work. I could tell the stress was wearing him down when he started calling me late at night, his voice frayed at the edges. "They miss you, Haley," he said once. "They ask about you every day." It nearly broke me. I missed them too more than I thought possible. But I also knew I couldn't go back. Not like before. Not when my presence was taken for granted, treated like something owed rather than cherished. When you stop being useful to people, you quickly find out whether they loved you or just loved what you did for them. And Danielle had made her answer painfully clear. When people can no longer control you, they'll try to control your story. I thought Danielle's worst was behind me. I thought the police call the constant micromanaging, the endless demands, that was as far as she would go. I was wrong. When she couldn't pull me back, she started rewriting the narrative. It started with whispers, comments I'd hear secondhand through family members or mutual friends. Subtle at first, almost forgettable. She's just too busy now. She's overwhelmed with work. She's pulling away from the family. At first, I brushed it off. I figured Danielle was saving face crafting a version of events that made her look blameless. But then the lies began to spread, and they weren't subtle anymore. One Sunday, while shopping for groceries, I ran into Liam and Lily in the cereal aisle. I heard them before I saw them. Lily's excited voice shouting "Aunt Haley" and Liam's quick footsteps as he dashed toward me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I knelt down, pulling them both into a tight hug, my throat burning as I fought tears. I had missed them so much. I didn't realize just how much until they were right in front of me again. "We haven't seen you in forever," Liam said quietly, his big brown eyes shining with something I didn't understand at first. Confusion, maybe, sadness. "Mommy said you're too busy now," Lily added, her voice small. Too busy. That wasn't the story I had told Mason. I had always said I wanted to see them, just not as Danielle's default babysitter. But now I realized Danielle had been telling them something else entirely. Before I could answer, Danielle appeared, pushing her cart toward us with her signature tight smile. The way her eyes flicked between me and the twins told me she wasn't pleased to see us reunited even by accident. "We need to finish shopping," she said briskly. "Come on, kids." "Can't we just talk to Aunt Haley for a little bit?" Lily protested, clinging to my hand. Danielle's smile didn't falter, but her tone sharpened. "We're in a hurry." "But you said we could look at the toys after shopping," Liam chimed in innocently. Her eyes flicked toward him, and he immediately quieted. "Now please," she repeated. I looked at Danielle, trying to keep my voice steady. "We haven't seen each other in weeks." "Let's just catch up for a minute." She stared at me, her gaze icy. "We have plans. And anyway, the kids understand you've made other priorities." I wanted to scream to correct her, to tell the twins the truth. But I swallowed it down. I couldn't make a scene, not with them standing there watching. I knelt down again, forcing a smile. "We'll talk soon, okay? I promise." As they walked away, I heard Lily's soft voice carry over the aisle. "Why isn't Aunt Haley allowed to see us anymore?" And Danielle's cold, bitter reply. "She decided she doesn't want to spend time with you." That moment shattered something inside me. It wasn't just that she was lying. It was that she was planting seeds in their hearts, trying to make them believe I had abandoned them, turning me into the villain in their story. I walked out of the store, my hands trembling, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and helplessness. The moment I reached my car, I called Mason. "Do you know what she's telling the twins?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "What happened?" His voice tensed immediately. I told him every detail, what the twins said, what I overheard Danielle telling them. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. And then Mason whispered, "I had no idea she was saying that. This is parental alienation, Mason. It's not just about me, it's hurting them." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "This might be the last straw." In that moment, something shifted in him. I could hear it. a quiet resolve forming where there had only been exhaustion before. A few nights later, he called me again, his voice firmer. I told Danielle I'm considering separation. I can't do this anymore. I sat in silence, processing what that meant. She's still spinning the story, he added bitterly. She's blaming everyone, me, you the babysitter, even the kids for getting sick too often. It's always someone else's fault. I wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was grief. I never wanted their marriage to collapse. I never wanted Liam and Lily's lives to fracture. But I also knew that sometimes the most painful changes are the ones that lead to healing. The next day, Mason and I met for coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually polished appearance was undone shirt, wrinkled dark circles under his eyes. I don't even know who she is anymore, he confessed. Or maybe this is who she's always been and I just refused to see it. He told me stories, little moments that now felt like warning signs. Her jealousy, her need for control, her habit of playing the victim, how she twisted reality so skillfully that he'd spent years questioning his own instincts. I let it happen, he said quietly. I let her push you to the edge. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. It wasn't the grand apology I might have expected months ago, but it was honest. It was real. And more than that, it was the first time Mason had truly seen me. I didn't know how things would unfold from there. I didn't know what kind of damage would need to be repaired. But I knew one thing with certainty. I wouldn't let anyone else write my story. Not Danielle, not guilt, not fear, just me. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when someone finally says it out loud. 6 weeks after Danielle called the police on me, our father's birthday arrived, a quiet family gathering that should have been about celebration, but instead became the final breaking point. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, had pleaded with all of us to put our differences aside for just one afternoon. For your father's sake, she said. Just try. I agreed, not because I wanted to see Danielle, but because I missed Liam and Lily more than I could bear. I told myself I could be polite, distant if necessary, but mostly I wanted to be present for my dad and for the twins. I arrived early to help Mom set up in the backyard, stringing up balloons and arranging a simple picnic table with lemon cake, Dad's favorite. It felt strangely familiar, this domestic rhythm we'd shared 100 times before. For a brief moment, I let myself believe maybe the day would pass without tension. Mason showed up right on time with Liam and Lily, and when they saw me, they rushed into my arms like no time had passed at all. Liam presented me with a card. He made himself stick figures of us holding hands. I drew us at the park, he said proudly. Lily, always chattier, filled my ears with stories about her new shoes and the neighbor's puppy. Their joy was so pure, so unconditional, it made my throat tighten. Vanessa's running late, Mason murmured, using his old nickname for Danielle out of habit. She said she'd be here soon. I had dared to hope she might not come at all. But of course she did, almost an hour late, her appearance strikingly disheveled. The woman who used to obsess over curated family photos now stood in front of us with tangled hair, dark circles under her eyes, and a hastily wrapped gift clutched in her hand. She didn't apologize for the delay. She smiled tightly and said, "Happy birthday, Howard," as though everything was perfectly normal. Throughout the afternoon, she made several trips to the drink cooler, each time pouring herself another glass of white wine. I watched her carefully, her mask slipping a little more with each sip. The tension between us hung heavy in the summer air, a fragile truce everyone was tiptoeing around. The twins stuck close to me, pulling me to the swing set, asking me to push them higher, begging me to play tag. I couldn't deny them. I didn't want to. But I noticed Danielle watching us, her gaze sharp and sour, her grip tightening on her wine glass. When we sat down for cake, she was already on her 4th glass. And then, just as the conversation lulled, she struck. "You know," she said, her voice loud enough to quiet the entire table, "it's funny how quickly children forget. You vanish for a few weeks and they act like you're their favorite person all over again." My mother, trying desperately to salvage the moment, offered a gentle reply. "Children are forgiving. Maybe adults could learn from that." Danielle laughed bitterly. "Or maybe they're just easy to manipulate. Haley's always been good at that, making herself the hero." "Danielle, not now," Mason said through gritted teeth, his patience visibly thinning. "Oh, please," she snapped, her speech slightly slurred. Everyone's treating Haley like some victim. She's the one who abandoned us. She's the one who couldn't handle the responsibility. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but she cut me off. Oh, don't even start. Over one tiny phone call, you fell apart. That tiny phone call could have ruined my career, I said calmly but firmly. You called the police on me, Danielle. You humiliated me. Danielle rolled her eyes dramatically. Someone had to teach you a lesson. The words landed like a slap. The air thickened. Even the twins, sensing the shift, stopped playing and looked toward us. You what? Mason asked, his voice dangerously low. I called the police to remind Haley those are my children, not hers. She was getting too comfortable acting like their mother. I needed to put her in her place. The silence that followed was deafening. You risked her job, traumatized our children, because you were jealous. Mason's voice trembled with rage. Danielle shrugged her wine sloshing in her glass. Nothing happened. The cops saw it was nothing. That's not the point. Mason slammed his palm against the table, making the silverware jump. You lied. You weaponized the police. You've been lying to the kids, to everyone. Mom quickly ushered the twins inside, shielding them from the explosion she knew was coming. You've spent all this time painting Haley as the villain. Mason continued, his voice breaking, when she was the one who showed up for you, for me, for our kids. She loved them, and you tried to destroy her for it. Danielle's defenses collapsed in one last desperate shot. She needs to get her own family and stop trying to steal mine. She didn't steal anything, Mason said coldly. You gave it away. You pushed away the one person who truly cared. She turned on me, then her words dripping venom. You've always been the favorite, haven't you? The perfect Aunt Haley, the one who makes everyone look bad. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. This isn't about me. It's about what you did. You'll all believe whatever you want anyway, she hissed, stumbling as she grabbed her purse. I'm done. You're not driving, Mason said firmly, taking her keys. I'll call you a cab. When she finally left, it was as if the whole house exhaled. Mason sat next to me on the patio, his hands shaking. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know she meant to hurt you on purpose. I suspected, I admitted, my voice soft. But hearing her say it out loud, it changes everything. And it did. In the ruins of that confrontation, the truth was undeniable. Danielle had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. For the first time in months, I felt seen. I felt believed. The fracture in our family was no longer mine to carry alone. The moment you choose yourself is the moment your life quietly begins to rebuild. In the weeks that followed the confrontation at my father's birthday party, everything moved quickly. Mason asked Danielle for a trial separation the very next morning. According to him, she cycled through rage denial bargaining and ultimately a cold kind of resignation. By the end of the week, she had packed her things and moved into her sister's apartment across town. For the first time in a long while, the house felt quieter. Mason called me 2 days after she left. I need help, he said, his voice exhausted. I can't do this on my own. Will you come back? I paused, not because I didn't miss Liam and Lily desperately, but because I knew I had to do this differently. I'll help, I told him carefully, but not the way things were before. This time we set boundaries. I wasn't stepping back into the role of free, unlimited childcare. I was stepping into the role of their aunt, present, supportive, but no longer invisible, no longer taken for granted. Mason agreed. He didn't fight me on it. I think deep down he understood he'd already asked too much of me before. The first day I returned to their home was emotional. When Liam and Lily saw me, they ran into my arms like no time had passed. Lily talked so fast she barely took a breath, telling me about her new puzzles and how she'd lost a baby tooth. Liam just hugged me tightly and whispered, I missed you every day. Those words sliced straight through me. I held them both close, knowing I couldn't undo the weeks we'd lost, but that I could show them moving forward that I wasn't going anywhere. There were changes I couldn't ignore. Liam had become more anxious, always asking if I'd be back the next day. Lily, normally fearless, clung to me, more needing reassurance I wouldn't just disappear again. Their trust had been rattled, and the weight of that broke something in me, even though I knew the fracture wasn't mine to own. I worked with Mason to build a schedule that worked for everyone 2 days a week, plus Sunday lunches as a family. I was there, but I was no longer their default caregiver. Mason picked up more of the responsibilities, and together we made it clear to the twins this was the new routine. Predictable. Safe. Danielle didn't take it well. Even though she'd left, she still fought for control in smaller ways. She argued about the schedule. She tried to suggest her sister Pamela could watch the twins instead of me, despite her sister's limited availability, and the children's obvious preference to be with me. Mason stood his ground. He defended me in ways he hadn't before. It felt like the balance of power had finally shifted. 2 weeks into the separation, Mason filed for divorce. "It's not just what she did to you," he told me over coffee. "It's years of control of making me question myself, of pushing people away." Part of me still struggled with guilt, as if I had somehow contributed to the end of their marriage. But Mason wouldn't let me carry that. "You didn't break us, Haley," he said firmly. "You just helped me see what was already broken." In the weeks that followed, I quietly rebuilt my life. I started saying yes to things I'd put off for years, a pottery class I'd always wanted to try, weekend hikes with old friends, a book club that filled my Friday nights with laughter instead of loneliness. And somewhere along the way, I met Ethan, a kind man with a calm energy who didn't flinch when I told him about the complicated mess of my family life. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened. And more than anything, he respected the space I was building for myself. My role with Liam and Lily also changed. I was still deeply involved in their lives, but I no longer let Danielle or anyone else dictate the terms of that involvement. I showed up at their preschool events. I took them on outings when Mason's schedule allowed. I loved them fully, but I no longer let that love consume me. I chose balance. I chose myself. Danielle predictably continued to complicate co-parenting, but Mason and I handled it differently now. We didn't bend to her demands. We didn't chase her approval. And when she attempted to frame herself as the victim to extended family, most of them quietly chose not to engage. One moment stays with me. It was a Saturday, 4 months after the birthday incident. I was dropping the twins off at Mason's when Danielle showed up earlier than expected. We hadn't spoken directly since that day. I kept my voice calm. They had a good day. She hesitated, then surprised me. "They're lucky to have you in their lives." She said, not quite an apology, but not an attack either. It wasn't closure. It wasn't forgiveness. But maybe in her own way, it was a crack in the wall she'd built. I nodded. "I'm lucky to have them too. Sometimes you don't get clean endings. Sometimes the best you can hope for is quiet understanding, shaky truces, and the freedom to keep moving forward on your own terms." 6 months later, our family looks different. Smaller, quieter, but more honest. I no longer feel trapped by guilt or fear. I've learned that choosing yourself doesn't mean you're abandoning the people you love. It means you're choosing to love them from a place that's healthy, not from a place of sacrifice. I'm still their aunt. I'm still their safe place. But now I'm my own safe place too. Looking back, I've come to realize that the most important lesson I learned through this entire journey is the power of setting boundaries, even with the people you love. For so long, I believed that being a good family member meant always showing up, always saying yes, always making myself available. I thought love was proven through sacrifice, through selflessness, through putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own. But I've learned that love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-erasure. There's this unspoken expectation, especially in families, that we should endure anything to keep the peace. I used to believe that too. I thought if I just kept bending, if I kept making myself smaller, eventually things would get easier. But the truth is, when you continuously give without limits, some people will take until there's nothing left of you. And when you finally say no, those same people may not miss you. They'll miss what you did for them. I used to carry so much guilt for stepping away. I worried that by refusing to babysit, I was abandoning my niece and nephew, or that I was somehow responsible for the collapse of my brother's marriage. But what I see clearly now is that protecting my own well-being wasn't selfish, it was necessary. In fact, it was the very thing that allowed me to rebuild a healthier relationship with my family, and most importantly, with myself. One of the hardest things to accept is that not everyone will understand your boundaries. Some will resent them. Some will twist your story to make themselves the victim, but that doesn't mean you're wrong for setting them. The people who genuinely care about you, who respect you, will eventually see the truth. And even if they don't, you still owe it to yourself to stand your ground. What I want anyone listening to this to remember is that you are not responsible for maintaining someone else's comfort at the expense of your own peace. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to step away from situations that drain you, even if those situations involve family. You are allowed to prioritize your mental health, your career, your safety. Family can be a beautiful thing, but it's not a free pass to mistreat someone. Real family, whether by blood or by choice, doesn't demand you shrink to fit their needs. Real family loves you with room to breathe. I know now that choosing myself wasn't walking away from my family. It was walking toward the version of myself that I can finally be proud of. And I hope you'll give yourself permission to do the same.